It is August 31st, 2020. This is Roqe. There is no shortage of discrepancy when it comes to telling stories about Iran and being Iranian over the last 75 years. We hear different versions of our background, often depending on the social, political, or personal perspective of those giving their opinion. But if history is made by those who report it and those who have lived it, then today's guest is a treasure. Homa Sarshar has been reporting on Iranian affairs for over 55 years, first in Iran, now in the United States. And she has done so with a commitment to objectivity, integrity, and respect for human rights. A feature episode with the brilliant Homa Sarshar coming up. This is stories from, to, and about the Iranian diaspora. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. This is Roqe. Welcome to episode number 40 of Roqe. Hi there. امیدوار هستم که عالی باشین. An episode I've very much been looking forward to today. Homa Sarshar set to join me in just a few moments, the legendary Iranian-American journalist. Hi Shaya.
Hello Jian.
خوبی؟
خوبم.
خوبی؟
Yes.
عالی. Groovy Shaya. By the way, I met somebody on the weekend who was talking about you and really enjoying, that, I really like Shaya, Groovy Shaya. And then completely separately later in a conversation was saying they like DangShow. They didn't put it together that you're Shaya from DangShow, the band DangShow.
Oh.
So I just assume everybody knows that that Groovy Shaya is from the Groovy DangShow fame and Roqe fame. Always a pleasure to see you, Shaya Jan. Last night, did you happen to see a program on CNN called United Shades of America with W. Kamau Bell?
No.
Did you hear about it?
No, actually, okay. I'm curious to hear about it.
Do you watch? Well, I don't imagine you watching TV or anything.
No,
do you? No. You're probably reading a history book about Reza Shah or something.
Yes, and I read it to practice piano. Actually.
Okay, well that's a good But sometimes it's worthy of watching. There's things on TV that are.
Sure.
So this show is this guy. He's actually a comedian. I've interviewed him before. He's a very nice man. He looks at immigrant groups and different races and ethnicities in America. So last night there was this full episode on Iranian-Americans on CNN.
Oh.
And it was good. I mean, it's some very good moments with some Jewish Iranians in New York and some high school girls teaching Farsi. And Jason Rezaian was on. He makes some great points. The Washington Post journalist. I don't think it was earth-shattering, this episode, and it was devoid of some of the charm and that groundbreaking feel of Anthony Bourdain's episode in Iran. Remember in 2014, and they referenced that a couple of times because that was on CNN as well. But my point is that my heart was still fluttering, when I see Iranians on a major show being profiled in a positive way. I was so happy to see it.
Yes.
It was so good, and it was so. It was good to see it. At the same time, I yearn for the day when it's not a big deal to see positive explorations of Iranians on American TV,
Yes.
It's always bittersweet. It's like, I want to call everybody, watch this. And I think, why can't we just get to the point where it's not a big deal? It still felt like a big deal last night. I was happy to see it, and way to go to W. Kamau Bell for putting that episode on. You should watch it. I'm sure you could see it.
Actually, the other day you recommend to me to watch Stop Making Sense, and I watched it, and I was
the Talking Heads concert movie.
Yes, thank you very much.
It is the second best concert film I believe ever made, and one of my favorite bands ever. Nothing to do with the Iranian diaspora. Although I would like to make David Byrne of Talking Heads an Iranian, an honorary Iranian, because we could use his creativity. He's just so brilliant. Stop Making Sense. If you want some recommendations, you can watch Stop Making Sense as well. By the way, speaking of recommendations, our series last week reflecting on the Pahlavi dynasty, on the 40th anniversary of the death of the Shah of Iran. This past summer marks the 40th anniversary. It's generating a lot of letters and comments. We did this over 2 episodes, so if you've not checked them out, please do so on any of our platforms. The last 2 episodes of Roqe, dealing with the Pahlavi dynasty, Dr. Abbas Milani, Andrew Scott Cooper, Mohammed Amini, all weighing in over 4 hours of programming. And remember that subscribing is free on any of our platforms, so please do so. A shout out as well to Mo Rahimian. Today's episode made possible in part due to Inshufen Inc., an insurance, investment, and financial services company. Mo Rahimian has made it his mission to give back to the Iranian community and Persian culture. Thanks to Mo. You can check out more at inshufen.com, INSUFIN, inshufen.com. Okay. Let's get to our very special guest today. Shall we, Shaya?
Yes, let's go.
When it comes to Iranian journalists, and particularly those who are now in the diaspora, it would be hard to make the case that there is anyone more iconic than my guest today. She was born in Shiraz in 1946 into a Jewish family, then raised in Tehran. She spent her first 32 years in Iran, where she studied French literature before getting her PhD in journalism at the American World University in the United States. Along the way, she has spent 55 years creating content, reporting, doing interviews, and bringing information into the lives of Iranians. Homa Sarshar is an Iranian-American author, activist, feminist, and journalist. She was a columnist for Zan-e-Roz magazine and Kayhan daily newspaper between 1964 and 1978. During that period, she also worked as a television producer, director, and talk show host for National Iranian Radio and Television. After moving to the U.S. in 1978, Homa Sarshar continued as a freelance journalist, radio and television producer, and an on-air host. She is a multiple award winner who is also the author of 4 books and the editor of 11 other volumes, including 5 volumes of the Iranian Women's Studies Foundation Journal and 4 volumes of the History of Contemporary Iranian Jews. In 2005, Homa Sarshar founded the Center for Iranian Creative Arts, a Los Angeles-based nonprofit organization and the first of its kind, and she has been a trusted advisor to Human Rights Watch for 25 years. She is currently the host of her popular radio program Sobhane ba Homa Sarshar, Breakfast with Homa Sarshar, which can be heard weekly in Los Angeles. And right now, Homa Sarshar joins me from LA, California. Hello.
Hello, Jian. How are you?
I am well. I am so happy and honored to be speaking with you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me to your popular talk show, or Roqe, as you call it.
Well, let me start. Well, thank you. Let me start here. Let me start with today. You clearly have a thirst for journalism and human stories and news that remains unabated. And if I start with your current work and your weekly radio program, I wonder, what is the allure for you at this point? Is it the human interaction? Is it the audience? Or is it being at the epicenter of important conversations about Iranians and the world?
First of all, is it a virus? Journalism is a virus. When you get it, you never get rid of it. So for 55 years, I have been doing that. I have been having this career that I love, and every single day that passes, I love it more. To answer your question, all the above. I have interactions with people. I have. It gives me ample time and also energy to read, to listen, to observe, and to be a mediator between what is happening and also between the people who listen or read or watch me on TV. I take it very seriously. I love it very much, and I think that I have been born to be a journalist because Even in my personal life, when I start asking questions, my husband says, "Can you put your journalism career aside?" I have an inquiring mind, so I think the match was good. And Homa Sarshar, the person, and Homa Sarshar, the journalist, we are living together very peacefully and interacting between us. So that's why I have continued for 55 years. And I think if nothing happened to me or I don't lose my mind, I'm in a good state of mind. I will continue until I die. But normally, well, you make it a little bit less, until the body doesn't let you do it or the mind doesn't let you do it.
You really love it more than you ever have. That's not just Persian Taruf. That's, you mean it.
I mean it, and I think that by staying in this career for 55 years, I made my point, because during all these 5.5 decades, I have been writing and I have been talking and I have been interacting with people, and not always everybody liked what I did. Everybody was agreed with what I did. So even the challenge of getting negative feedbacks, or sometimes people just not liking me and leaving voicemail that are not nice, even that didn't let me stop doing what I'm doing.
Right. How does the virus manifest itself in the moment? I'm curious if you still get that energy jolt, those butterflies when you do an interview, the nervousness that, say, a young journalist would have if they're interviewing a shah or an important person or a CEO. Where is that in? Is that still in you, or have you been there, done that enough that you don't need those butterflies anymore?
No, I do have it. When I'm doing my radio show, is not that much because people cannot see me. But to be honest with you, Jian, when I'm on the stage and I talk to people and audience that are sitting in front of me, it's like the first day that I'm doing this. I hear my heartbeat on my throat. And, I'm sure that you have experienced that one also. If you call it butterfly, I say it's my heart beating so fast. So even now, and even in this age, when I go on the stage, I still have this sentiment and this reaction that my body shows, and I am aware of it every single time. So it doesn't go away, and the virus they have not found it. They have not found the vaccine yet, so it's going to be with me all the time.
In case you're just tuning in, Homa Sarshar does not have the virus that is a popular pandemic right now. She has the media, the journalism virus. Let me ask you about methodology, because I've had the occasion to interview some icons of journalism, and I find there is a stark contrast between them, between someone like Larry King, say, who told me he takes pride in not being too prepared for his questions so he can be, as he sees it, more natural when he asks them. And Barbara Walters, who told me she fastidiously did her homework for any and all interviews she's ever done. And then someone like Dan Rather, who says to me, you have to go with the flow. So what about you? What about Homa Sarshar? Do you believe in extensive preparation, or do you rely on your investigative and intuitive skills in any situation somehow?
No, not expensive one, but I prepare myself. I do whatever is needed to know my guest, and sometimes my guests ask me, send me your question, and I try to tell them that the first reaction to a question would be the best one. If you prepare for yourself to answer a question, it's not going to have that oomph that we're looking for in journalism. Right. So I think about question. I don't put question on paper, and I go with the flow. I'm 100% with Dan Rather, because you know the first question, what you're going to ask, and then according to the answer that you get, you may have another question. So I can say that I am 50-50. I prepare myself, and the only thing that I do it very deeply is to know my guest, to read about him or her, and when I wanted to introduce my guest, I should know who I'm introducing, and that's the way I do it.
Just reading that introduction about you and all that you've accomplished, and that's without getting into the challenges you've had to face as a Jewish woman in Iran, especially, and then as a new immigrant for some time in America. There is a notion with someone like you that this was destiny. Was it? Did you always want to be in media, someone who tells stories?
No, actually not. I was in love with architecture, and I wanted to become an architect. But as you may know, in Iran, going to the university needs an exam that you pass, like SAT that they pass here, and we call it concours. And in that exam, you decide to go to, you have the right to choose 3 schools or department to go in. And I have decided to go. I have written on my application that I want to be an architect, and my first choice was architecture. And my second choice was French literature, because I was speaking French, and I knew that not too many people would speak French at that time. So that was like a backup for going into the university. But unfortunately, I was not successful to go to architecture department. So they decided to send me to the French literature. And then when I was there, I saw and I became friend with the journalist that was also in the school, and he told me that there is a magazine coming out called Zane Rouz, and they need a French translator. And I was a student, I needed money, and then I decided to go. And I said, yeah, fine, I will do it. And when I went there and I started doing translation of articles from French newspapers and magazines, I found out that this is what I meant to be. So from there, from being a translator, I became a reporter, and then I became a columnist, and the rest is this history. And I stayed in Zane Rouz in magazine for almost 10 years, and then I went one step up, and I went to Kayhan, the daily newspaper, and from there to television, and I had my own program 2 times a week, and until revolution happened.
Okay, so you said a lot there, but since you're talking about your time in Iran, that's a good segue. Let's go back. Take me back to, first of all, to the beginning. Tell me about being a Jewish kid in Shiraz and then Tehran in the 1950s and 60s. How would you characterize life in those years for you?
I was born in Shiraz, but I was not raised in Shiraz. My parents moved to Tehran when I was a year and a half, so I don't have that much memory from my very early childhood in Shiraz. But in Tehran, we had a very modest life. My father was working, my mom was raising us, and she would not work, and we were living with our family. And one thing that happened that maybe made my childhood and made who I am today is my mom's decision to put me in a French school. And that French school was run by French nuns. So in that school, which was primarily Christian, there was no difference between us. We had Muslims, we had Jewish, we had Christians, and we had Assyrians, and living with different religions, different people around me, and including the director, including the teachers, and also my classmates and everything, brought up in me to being a citizen of the world, not to think about myself as a Jewish girl. And we were living in peace. We were loving each other. Nobody would ask, what's your religion at that time? And at 18 years old, when I just started working and went to the university at the same time, I wouldn't feel any different, to be honest with you. And the only time that this hit me, and hit me very hard, was a couple of months or 3 or 4 months before the revolution, when people got very excited about the revolution, people got very emotional about it, and I started to see the different gaze of other people to me.
Let me get to that, though. That's important. I want to get to that. Okay. But I want to stick with it for a second about your childhood, because I want to know how you became you. Were you always inquisitive as a kid? Were you asking a lot of questions? Were you like a little interviewer even when you were a kid?
Yes, I have heard so many times that bache chara fuzuli. And also, I was raised in a family that with matriarch family, where women were very, very outspoken. My mom was my grandmother were, and so I learned from them. They had saying in the family. So I learned about it, and my father was very supportive of women also, and he also gave me the wing to fly. So I think that the way that I was brought up in the school and in the family let me be whatever I wanted, and let me go after what I wanted and have a goal, because most of my classmates, when we finished the high school, most of them got married. And I got married too after a year, but I told my husband, if I want to get married with you, you should promise me something. And he said, what? He said, you should let me go to the university, because I know that for that time that I was getting married, if you stay in the university, it was very hard to get married afterwards, because there was a saying at that time, they would say, دخترها دو جورن، یا خوشگلن یا میرن دانشگاه. The girls are
either they're pretty or they go to the university.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What a terrible saying. Yeah.
I know, and I just wanted to go to university so badly. And my husband also was a very intellectual guy, and he said, of course. And he helped me with sitting my kids, my two sons, when I was going in a class, and when I was going to television to record or to my program. He would do everything for me to reach my goal, and forever and ever I'm very thankful to him, and I appreciate what he did for us in the family. So I think all depends on who is around you and how they react to you being so ambitious in your life.
Right. Well, this is obviously an incredible testament to your parents and those strong working women around you in Tehran, whether it's your mother, your grandmother, etc., that when you say you didn't feel that exceptional, you didn't feel that different, you didn't feel like you didn't fit in, you didn't feel like you were particularly discriminated against, this is quite extraordinary, because you were, whether it was Zaniruz or Kayhan, you were a Jewish woman in Iran working as a journalist throughout the 1960s and 1970s. I can't imagine there were a lot of other Jewish women doing this job, were there?
No. I am one of the 10 Iranian women journalists that was working at that time. So in these 10 people, we were only 2 Jewish ladies working. And
so you must have had some awareness that you were different, or you were quite exceptional.
Honestly, I have encountered some of my colleagues after the revolution outside Iran, and they would say, Homa, we didn't know you were Jewish. Now we find out that you're Jewish. So honestly, Jian, what I'm telling you is very honest. We wouldn't ask people about their religion. Nobody would care at that time. There was a discrimination for the Jewish people in the laws of the country. You could not get higher than one stage if you were an employee of the government. You would not not go higher if you were in the army. You never become a sepahbod, timsar, ateshbod if you were Jewish or non-Muslim, actually, to make it correctly. But the way that we live on that period in Iran, we wouldn't notice that we are very different from others. We knew that we were minorities, and by knowing the history, we would know that we wouldn't be able to do much, because living a Jewish living in a Muslim country could do that much, not more than that. But I, for one, didn't let my religion be an obstacle for what I was doing. And fortunately, I never encountered an animosity or persecution, but I have heard from my parents, I have heard from my grandmother, I have heard from my mother-in-law and father-in-law that they were living in Isfahan or Shiraz at the time, and many, many years before I was born. They had problems, and there was like persecution of minorities. But I think that the time that we were in, I started working, the whole country were just in a stage that they wanted to do something for the country, and we were working hard to make a better life for the country and for the other people in my country.
You know, that's an interesting point, because I want to get this from you in terms of the clarity from you, because we've had a few guests, Homa, on this show who have talked about, either if they're talking about their childhood or their parents, or, you know, who've talked about a time in Iran, and I guess in most cases it's Tehran, but not exclusively Tehran, in the 70s and the 60s, where they talk about a very multi-ethnic, multi-racial and a community that was quite integrated and quite harmonious. And I always wonder, is that dewy-eyed nostalgia from, you know, looking back and going, oh, it was so much better, especially because of what comes afterwards in terms of the current regime, or was it in fact that harmonious and integrated?
It was harmonious, and it was for fact a real life that we were just having over there. So, and because of that, you know, a lot of people like me, a lot of minorities, when the first movement and demonstration started, and they saw that something Islamic is coming, and a religious man is just becoming the number one leader of the opposition group and demonstrators and stuff like this, we wouldn't believe it. Nobody, and you know what? Many of my colleagues would tell me, "Don't worry, Homa, it's not going to happen. This is not going to happen. This is just a symbol. We're just following this guy, but we're going to do it. There would be a democracy. There would be this. There would be that." And I said, "He's a religious man. He's going to come, and he would change the law in the country." And they said, "No, are you kidding? It's not going to happen." But it happened. So I want to make the point that we were so in tune with the life that we were there, and we were so relaxed that nothing would happen, that when it happened, actually it happened, it got us in very big surprise.
Well, before we get to that moment, the events of 1978 and the events with you that are quite harrowing, just sticking with what it's like to be a media person in Iran in this period, we know that there has been no shortage of censorship of the media and culture under the current Islamic regime in Iran. But we also hear a lot about the crackdown on dissent and opposition during the Pahlavi years, even in the 1970s as well. Did you feel free to be objective and tell the stories you wanted to tell when you worked as a producer, as a director, as a host on Iranian national radio and television? Or were you aware of lines even then you could not cross?
Yes, we were aware of lines that we couldn't cross, and we wouldn't cross. So there was a generation of newscasts or generation of journalists at that time in Iran that we learned how to self-censor ourselves. So we knew that there is something that we should not write about it. And sometimes also very innocently, you would write something that would not be published because they find a trait on it that was somehow giving some messages, hidden messages to the readers of the newspaper or magazine, and they would not print it. And we would say, okay. For example, I translated actually this one, an article about being left-handed. also for the kids that were left-handed from the birth. And this article was not published because they said this is going to give a connotation about left.
It's chappy.
Chappy, that's the chappy.
Right.
So, for me as a journalist, that was not at all political, and I was not against the regime, and I was doing my job as a journalist educator, and giving voice to women, and also at that time anything that women wanted to do were allowed to do it because they find they got the right voting right, and they got the right for divorce, they got the right for travel, they got the right to get their kids when they're divorced, and all these قانون حمایت خانواده at that time was very, very hot, and the law was passing so we were giving time, and also we were giving the liberty to talk about all this, but there was something that we knew sometimes some things were very sensitive. You should not touch it. You should not talk about the royal family. You should not go in a bad sense, criticize them or something like that. But you could criticize the prime minister. You could criticize the mayor of the city, but the red line was the royal family. So I think we didn't know any better about democracy or being free to write, freedom of writing, or freedom of speech, or freedom of beliefs. So in the context of the law that was in the country, we were navigating and writing and doing and talking about it and having conferences and having lectures, and on national Iranian television I had a program about the family, so everything about family. We're having psychologists on my show, having sociologists in my show, talking about why these problems are in the family, which kind of problems are, the mother and the father, how they should raise kids and stuff like this. So my job and my career in Iran, back in Iran, was not political at all.
Was not as affected, right.
Yeah. So I was not affected by censorship.
Although when you talk about that self-censorship, it's a precarious path, right? Because it can then become socialized behavior. In other words, is there a danger that you somehow become neutered? You get used to not wanting to cross those lines, and that's who you become then, right? And this is, of course, a more prominent issue after the revolution, and it's a difficult one that filmmakers or artists or cultural figures or, I guess, media people, of course, in Iran now have to keep walking this line. And after a while, you wonder, well, who do you become if you have to keep creating things that stay within the box, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Is it not comparable what is going on in Iran today and before the revolution? It's 100 times worse. 100 times worse.
So you were a prolific and consistent journalist with Zanaruz, as we've talked about, with Kayhan in the 60s and 70s. Then things change in this period leading to the revolution in 1978. The story of your final days, and I've listened to you tell this story in your recording of it, the final days at Kayhan, it is both heartbreaking and infuriating. Can you give us the short version of what happened at that fateful time in the fall of 1978 to you?
So at that time I was a translator of news at the Kayhan newspaper, and we had like a different editor and different group were together. One editor was for news, international news, another editor was for Iran news, and there was also other department for different kind, like news writers for sports, and it's a newspaper has everything. So I was on the group of news translator, and I would translate from French. And we had an editor and we were all sitting around a big table. So we were talking to each other, and we were exchanging ideas and stuff like this. And one day that I came, that was that was the week that Ayatollah Khomeini left Iraq and went to Paris.
Right.
And people and all the news and giving his schedule of meeting with the different news about Ayatollah Khomeini in Paris. And mostly France Press was one of the wire, news on the wire that would talk about and write about those days. And after a few days, I was sitting at the table waiting for the wire to come for me to translate. I didn't get any. And after 1 or 2 days, I was suspicious. What happened? I would ask, don't you get any wire? And they said no. But then at night, I would go home, and I was subscribed to newspaper. It would come to my door, and I would look at the newspaper, and I said, there is articles or translations from France Press. And finally, after 2-3 days, I went to my editor and said, why you don't give me those news to translate? I'm doing nothing, sitting here doing nothing. And he started to say, okay, sit down and don't complain. Why are you nagging? But after 2-3 times or 2-3 days, I just couldn't stand it anymore. So I went to him and said, tell me what's going on. And at that time, when he responded to me, to my question, he replied to my question, was the time that I find out that something has changed in this country and something has changed in the mind of people. And he said, are you crazy? Who will give the news of Ayatollah Khomeini to a Jewish girl? You know, it will become dirty, as we say in Persian, najis. Mm-hmm. So I was in kind of state of shock, and I just looked at him, and I was speechless. I didn't know how to respond. And then the story is long, so this is the day that I decided to come and sit home and not go back to work. And then following event that happened, and I talked to one of my colleagues, and I talked to my neighbors and stuff like this. And every time there's another shock, and my colleagues say, you know what, for you it's better to go to Israel, to your own country. I said, what do you mean my own country? My own country is Iran. And you know what? That's every time that I talk about this event, my heart just breaks again and again. And that was it. And we left the country. We left the country because my husband also was, they fired him from his job, and they fired me from national Iranian television. Everything happened in 2 weeks. So we said, maybe it's not permanent what's happening. Let's go out and let's leave for now. And we left 2 months prior to the revolution. I never went back.
Homa, I mean, I guess this is stating the obvious, but there's this very sad irony around the fact that the very revolutionaries in your story, who ostensibly see themselves as, I guess, progressive and comrades and Roshan Fekr in some way, are the ones who are suddenly calling you by demeaning sexist names and alluding to your Jewish race. How hard was that for you?
Bravo, Jian, to catch this point. This is the time that hurt me more, because you wouldn't expect from them. You know what? You wouldn't expect that somebody that was like you. They used the name that Kayhan belonged to the leftists, and Etalat belonged to the rightists. So in that editorial group that was in Kayhan, more than 100 people were working there, and there was a lot of people that were just liberals from the left, and we were communicating. We were just colleagues, and we were friends, and never a religion of somebody will come up. And all of a sudden you see that change, that sudden change in the mentality of these people, and they had them some excuse. They said, this is a bahanas, this is an excuse for us. Don't get us wrong. A progressive person will never go back to religion, will never accept a religious man as a leader. We need to, for the revolution to happen, then people who take the crown out of Shah's head, they will very, very easily take the amame out of a clergy.
Right.
So it's easy. It's not nothing important. Don't worry about it. But I saw it. I saw it happening slowly, and the most embarrassing and the most shocking one were the intellectuals that changed all of a sudden.
And by the way, that change that you were at the forefront of, or you were there in the moment of, as I understand it, I mean, Kayhan has basically since then been an organ of the Islamic regime, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
that change happened and it never changed back, yeah. So you arrive in California in 1978. What was it like to come to the United States as someone who'd been this journalist on the front lines in Iran? Now you're in a new country with a language that you don't, I don't know, you probably didn't speak that well. I know you spoke French.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't speak English.
You didn't speak English?
No.
So what was that like for you and your husband when you first arrived?
It was a culture shock. It was fear of unknown. It was dark. I literally cried for 6 months. Whoever asked me, Homa, how are you? I would start crying because I wouldn't believe it. Because we came here not permanently, we came temporary, and our desire was to go back. So we just locked our apartment and just left. And the thought of not going back to the country was something that would kill me at the beginning. So the only thing that I could have think about it and would give me some kind of relief at that moment is to go back to university again. So I decided to go back to university, and my husband said, "You don't speak English." I said, "Okay, so what? I'm going to learn English while I'm in the class." And it was hard. It was hard. I started going to USC and for my master's degree and in communication in hope to go back to my own country with a better education and a better knowledge of journalism. And that's why I decided to go to Annenberg School of Communication. It was very hard. And then I started to write because there was a Iranian Jewish Federation that they started an organization for Iranian Jewish here in Los Angeles, and they wanted to have like a newsletter. So they asked me to do it. They knew me, so they asked me to do it. So that was something, a little delkhoshi for that time. So I started that newsletter, and it became a magazine because I had
Is that Shofar?
to do with Shofar.
Yeah.
Yes. And then I got a call from Iraj Gorgin, who also fled the country and came to Los Angeles, and he said, "We should start a radio here, and are you coming to work with me?" And I said, "Of course, but I don't know how to work in radio." He said, "I'm going to teach you." So all this happened in a period of maybe 6-7 years, and then I was a little bit satisfied that I'm doing what I love more, so writing, talking, giving. And at that time there was a lot of new organization, Iranian organization outside, in diaspora actually, that would invite me to talk, to give a lecture, and then slowly the television, cable TV, Iranian cable TV started, that one person would just rent 1 hour of that time per week. So we started with television 1 hour per week, and I was writing the editorial. And then the life went on.
Let me deconstruct a bit of what you said, because there's some important moments in there, not just for you, but I think for our diaspora. First of all, by the way, you didn't just arrive as someone who is in a new country, with a language that you don't speak, and having had this heartbreaking event in your home country, but also right after that, I mean, the revolution happens, and then the hostage crisis happens, and Iranians become persona non grata in North America, as I recall. I was a kid, but I remember this. So that would have also animated all of these things that are happening with you, right? I mean, I don't know how were you affected by that? Were you inoculated from that at USC or in California, or did you feel the turn that the shift in opinion that happened in America when Iran went from this benevolent sort of place that was a friendly nation, if you knew anything about it, to what would become, in the words of various American presidents, the evil empire?
Yeah, that was the second shock. The hostage taking was the second shock that the Iranian community in diaspora felt. My kids felt it in the school. I felt it in our neighborhood. And at that time, we had a couple of organizations, Iranian organization, and also the radio was working. Our radio was working. So they asked us to go to for an interview to different radios or different gatherings and talk about Iranian community and tell people that, listen, we are not with those people, these hostage takers. We are against them, because if we were one of them, we would have been in Iran. Right. We flew the country. We are exiled. We are immigrants. We are refugees. And this means that we don't agree. We don't approve what they're doing. It was hard, but the Iranian community came together to teach our American host here in my city, for example, to tell them that no, we are different, and you should not treat us like those hostage takers. It was very hard. It was heartbreaking at the time. It was humiliating sometimes, because we heard so many times, "Go back to your own country," and the same thing that I now that I laugh about it is this laugh is a very dark laugh.
Yes.
At that time I also felt the same heartbreaking sentiment that I had when my colleague told me, "Go back to your country," when I was in Iran, and she meant that I should go back to Israel. So it was hard, but we managed to put that one behind us too. That at least it took a year, 1 year and a half, for people to start just getting a little bit more friendly with us and accept us as people that are against the regime in Iran, back in Iran.
You alluded to some of the media that had begun in the period when you get here and that you're recruited to be part of. I want to ask you the question directly. There are a fair number of Persian radio and TV programs in the diaspora now, of course, especially coming out of the United States, but really around the world. What was the media landscape like for Iranians outside of Iran in the early 1980s?
It was kind of media. I won't call them media, because there was like one room in a gentleman that was working on Iranian national TV, but was not host or was not producer. He was like a engineer, for example, back in Iran on NIR TV, and they started to broadcast. First of all, to broadcast through the cable TV and the rental time, and it started with the first one that I went with them and talked to Jam, and then other 1 hour TV, rental TV started. The production was very poor. The professionalism didn't exist, but people would watch, because this was the only line of liaison between Iranian community. So we started to have ads, advertising, and doctors and lawyers and different kind of jobs. They would give us advertising, and that would just generate some money for the producer of the program to do it. And little by little, when the satellite started, all of a sudden everything changed from a small 1 hour TV, rental TV on a cable, on an American cable channel, to a 24-hour program on TVs. And but that time, many of these people that started talking and being a host on the TV, they became a little bit familiar with TV journalism and TV hosting and stuff like this. So they started to, and they also started to recruit old journalists and old TV personalities back from Iran in their cables or in their satellite TV. Still to this day, except a couple of TVs that are sponsored by governments back in London or in Washington, D.C.,
Right.
The other that are produced by just one person or one family that they're doing is not the correct or the ideal television that you are expecting or channel that you're expecting. But they're trying, and they're trying hard. That some of them has survived for 40 years, and they're still doing it. But now the competition is so vast, and that they're just producing programs, and there are channels, I don't know, more than 40, 50 channels, Iranian channels, most of them out of here in Los Angeles, and some of them mostly in London, and also in Canada. We have a lot in Canada too. So
why don't you work there? I mean, I'm curious. I mean, but you haven't stopped since the early 80s, by the way. You are tireless in continuing to do your work, whether it's publishing, writing, or doing your weekly radio show or doing appearances. But you have said that you don't make much money doing what you do in terms of the radio show, etc. Why doesn't Homa Sarshar go and work with one of these big Iranian networks now, the Manoto or Iran International, BBC, Persian, or all of these guys?
Honestly, when I started radio with Iraj Gordin and Radio Umid, and it was a very, very successful radio, I fall in love with radio as a media. And I did my editorial on Jam Jam as a part of me that was still had the nostalgia of the television. But at one time, I thought that my messages and what I'm telling people, I want to be and do, is through the microphone of radio, and not the camera of TV. So I decided not to continue. I go to TV, some of these cables that you're talking, Manoto, Iran-International, and Voice of America, but as a guest. And I think that is enough for me. And radio is the one that is my love for now, and I love it when I go to studio and I have the mic in front of me and I close my eyes and start talking to people. I feel much better than just doing makeup and getting dressed and everything, and being there, make sure that you don't move that way, or you don't close your eyes, you don't blink.
I so agree with you. I am, in fact, even with Roqe, I mean, we have a studio, and when post-COVID, people come into the studio, maybe we will start using cameras, etc. But a lot of people say, "Oh, why don't you guys do the thing on Zoom that everybody's doing now?" And so there's visuals, and honestly, I am so in love with audio still, and I really believe that we can have, even though you and I are not even in the same room right now, we can have a more profound conversation without the visuals, and that it's a different experience for the consumer, the person who's listening, the person who's experiencing the interview. It's different than it would be if there were visuals, where you're distracted by, oh, look at her hair, or what's in the background, or did he just move his hand, or I'm not sure I like the way this guy is dressed, or whatever it is. And theater of the mind. This is radio. I've always believed is that theater of the mind. You're developing the images yourself. So I'm with you on that, and I understand it.
And also, you're talking to a more active audience when is radio, as opposed to television that are more passive ones.
Yes.
So they listen to you when they're driving car, they listen to you when they're walking. So I think that radio is the media of the future.
Hear. I hope that's. Certainly, it's been an interesting twist. Radio was supposed to be dead 15 years ago, and now with podcasts and all the different platforms out there, there's been this surge again in audio programming, which warms my heart. I want to I know I can't keep you forever. I want to, before I let you go, ask you a few questions about the diaspora, because you are in such an important position to be able to reflect on what you've seen. You've said personally that you knew after a little while, and you've said it in this interview, that you would never return to Iran. But there are many in our diaspora, as you know, that exist in this kind of exilic mindset, this notion that we are waiting for a day to return to some glorious Iran that may never exist again or may never have existed. But does it hamper the ability of our global community, in your view, to grow outside of Iran, to have the kind of impact socially, economically, politically that we would want to have, if there is this sense of being temporary or squatting until we can return to Iran at some point?
I put temporary life in outside Iran back behind me many, many years ago. And I think that nowadays, when you're a citizen of the world, your country and your beloved motherland is with you whenever you go. It doesn't mean that you should live in a geographic premises to be Iranian. You can be Iranian whenever you are, wherever you are, and whenever you go. And I think that I'm much more Iranian and a better Iranian when I have the means from here, from Los Angeles, to talk about my country, to be the voice of the voiceless in Iran, to be an activist, to try to give motivation to my countrymen and countrywomen back in Iran, then if I live there and my hands are tied, I cannot do anything. So I see these temporary Iranian resident living outside Iran, especially in Los Angeles and California, getting old. They're becoming frustrated, becoming depressed, just for the thought that they have been here for 40 years and every single day they longed for going back to their country. And I think they have wasted a lot of time not doing anything except hoping for that return. Everybody can do something, and if something happens to Iran, if the regime is changed, we can always go back. But I think that we haven't, the way that I think and the way that I see the situation right now doesn't mean that I should waste my 40 years here not doing anything, just except hoping going back. No, I don't believe that, and I know that my kids love to be in Iran, but they are just, one is a chemist, another one is a writer, and then a PhD in literature, and he writes books, and he's historian about Iran, and he's one of the contributors for the Encyclopedia Iranica. Both of them they're very deeply Iranian, but they are also civil servants for Iranians. They're doing something for our history. They're doing something for our country. And by doing this, we are living in Iran, outside Iran. My home is Iran.
But that temporary mindset, that exilic mindset, also, I believe, or my concern would be, leads to a disincentive to integration. So you have these situations. I mean, you in your community in LA, for example, it's an older Iranian community that's been there for a few decades. In Toronto, where I'm sitting right now, there's a few of us who've been here for a few decades, but for the most part, it's a very new community. There's been a lot of immigration in the last 10 years, last 20 years, last 5 years to Toronto. And what you see in certain parts of, in fact, we call it Tehran, right, is there are elements of the community that, because they've all transplanted here, don't see the incentive, don't see the need to integrate into the broader Canadian community, because where there's our, the friendly, the restaurant that we go to, and there's our friends, and these are the same people I went to Sharif University with anyway, and so I'm just going to speak to them and stay in my little bubble, because one day we might return to Iran anyway. But in the means,
they don't even learn the language.
Correct. I mean, I'm not talking about people who are in their 80s. I would forgive that. I would go, okay, well, you've lived a long life. You don't need to. I'm talking about 30-year-olds who come here and don't know know the language. They've been here for 10 years. So, and I know these people. I'm not making this up. My concern is then what happens to our ability as a community to interact with and influence and have a say in what's happening in the broader community. I know you have a campaign in the U.S. right now to be counted on the census, right? Iranians to be counted on the census. That appeals to me because it's Iranians saying, yes, we have this home country, as you've called it throughout this interview, but we are also in America, and we want to be counted here in America. And that's the part that is I find is dangerous about the exilic mindset, if you know what I mean.
Exactly, I'm with you 100%, and I think that is a shame not to be able to see where we are living and to integrate with the people that are around us and the country that we have been living for 40 years. Actually, I am living outside Iran in diaspora more than the time that I was living in Iran.
Yes.
So I cannot close my eyes for what is happening. For example, now that is the time for U.S. election, the presidential election, is totally different from those people that are still feel that they are just temporary here, and they think that the one we should choose the person for a presidency of the United States that will just overthrow the regime in Iran.
Right.
And they don't think that if this guy is good for America, is good for the community, the whole things that's happening in the United States is a good person for climate change and stuff like this, but only if he or she will say that I will overthrow, and this is only saying. And I believe that each country, each leader of a country should 100% do something for his or her countrymen, for his country. No leader will give more value to another country than his or her own.
Right.
So this is the point of difference between people like me that think that in election, how we should elect the country, how we should vote for a president, than the people that think that this president is good for Iran, or this party is good for Iran, and this party is bad for Iran.
Well, on that note, I mean, the Iranian diaspora is quite divided. Particularly
Very divided.
Around prescriptions for change in Iran. We are balkanized, and often it's not even easy to have a conversation about it. Do you feel like the Iranian diaspora, as it has grown exponentially, has become more divided over the last 40 years?
I believe that the Iranian community has been divided during the last 4 years. I haven't seen such a division in our community.
The last 4 years?
4 years, during the Trump presidency. And this has just, we had moderate people, we had people from left, we had people from right, and we had people from the middle. And we would vote for such president from Democrats or from Republicans, and there would be no fight. Now we are encountering fights. Believe me, Jian, there's fights in the family, between the friends, and they're killing each other. Why are you voting for this, and why are you not voting for the other one? And this division, in a context of the country, in the United States, you feel it, and in our community, you feel it more.
Well, no, I believe you because I feel it directly because depending on which guest we bring on from the Iranian community anywhere in the world, we get a bunch of mail saying, why did you bring this person on? They represent this faction or another. And then the next week we bring somebody who's completely different, and a whole bunch of other people say, this person is a Pahlavi lover, or this person is with Jomhuri Islami. You must have experienced this. How do you deal with an Iranian audience that has aspirations or expectations for you to take a side politically? I know you pride yourself on the objectivity of a journalist, but there are people who don't always like that in this polarized and heated world community. How do you deal with it?
I do my best to be a fair journalist, and to have all kind of guests in my program. From left, from right, from middle, from, different ideas, religious people, non-religious, secular ones. I bring everybody, and I every time I said, I'm questioning my guests, and you listen to them, and you decide for yourself if you like this guy or you don't like it, or if you believe in his or her or point, or you're not. We don't have a fight. The fight is futile. Why are we fighting with each other? There is no point in fighting. We just talk to each other. Let's talk. Let's get our point across and be civilized and be calm. But I have failed. I'm sorry.
Who would you bring anyone on your show? I mean, would you? What Zarif?
If he decides to come, if he accepts my invitation, I would love to have him.
So because you know that there's people who are going to say, "Oh, you're giving a platform to the regime." So
to the regime, I understand that.
Yes.
But it depends on questions that you ask.
Yes. Have you changed as a journalist? What do you do now that you wouldn't do as a younger person working in media?
I would be very competitive, and I was very competitive, and I was very aggressive when I was young. And I would just wanted to put across my point of view, and I would just stand for it, and I would talk, and I would argue. I don't do it that way. And now I'm in a kind of peace with myself, and if people are just leaving nasty voicemail for me, and why are you, exactly the same thing that happened with you. Why are you bringing this guy or this lady to your program, and you're not Iranian, you're just a traitor and all this. So I listen, and I just say, when you get a lot of criticism from different group and different views, from left, from right, from middle, from religious, from
You're
secular,
doing something
everybody.
right. You're doing something
we are
right.
doing something right. So I'm in peace with myself, so I don't get angry, and I don't try to
فهمیدم. You don't need to prove yourself. Do you read comments in social media, or do you stay away from them?
Oh, I love comments.
You read the bad ones?
I read all.
And it doesn't hurt you?
I get sad, but I don't get angry to respond. I never should respond, but I get sad because sometimes I feel I have worked for 55 years, but there are people that they don't know me that good. But then I said maybe they're just new listeners. I console myself that there are people that they don't know me. So,
one final question for now. And you'll have to promise to come back, because there's so much we still haven't covered with you, with your books, your human rights work, all that you've done over the years. Your personal story has had many ups and downs, and the Iranian people have been through so much in recent decades. On the first episode of Roqe back in April, I talked about wanting to create this show at a time when it's been a very difficult year for those in Iran and those in the Iranian diaspora. Through all of that, through all of it, you keep going. And I can only see that as a measure of your belief that a difference can be made. How do you stay positive? How do you not succumb to discouragement?
Sometimes I get frustrated, sometimes I get depressed, sometimes I get sad, but I give myself 24 hours. I tell myself, Homa, sleep on that. Don't react now. Sleep on that and give yourself 24 hours before reacting, because there's some instances that I said, okay, I have been working for 55 years. Now I don't deserve to get this kind of reaction from people. So why don't I get retired? And then, as I said, I just give myself a couple of days, maybe 1 day, 2 days. And then I said, I have decided to do this, and I knew all the ups and downs. And this is going to pass. This is going to pass. So be calm, take a break, take a breath, rerun your program, and in 2 weeks have another new guest, and just continue what you're doing. You're doing not a bad job, so don't give up.
But what about on a broader level? Do you have an optimism about the future for Iranian people? I'm
optimistic, and I think democracy and freedom will one day be in Iran. Maybe I will not see it because I don't see it as a just sudden change. But I'm sure that the future of Iran is a country with freedom and liberty and equality for all the citizens of Iran. It may not be my time to see it, but listen, the life of a nation is so vast and so big that mine is a very little, like little time during this long history of my country. So this will pass, but I'm very optimistic that in the future, maybe not near future, but in the future, we will see a free Iran for sure.
I'm so grateful for the time you've given us today. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for having me in your show, Jian.
I look forward to seeing you in person again before too long. Merci.
خواهش میکنم. روز شما بخیر.
خداحافظ. Homa Sarshar is an award-winning journalist, author, and activist. Her weekly radio program is called Breakfast with Homa Sarshar. She joined us from Los Angeles, California today. And let's go out on some music by DangShow. This Too Shall Pass. Now that I think of it, not unrelated to what Homa Sarshar was just saying about taking a breath when she is agitated or upset at the state of things and reminds herself that this will pass. This song by DangShow, Shaya and his brother Taha and others, is from 2019. Thanks to all of you for supporting and subscribing to Roqe. Thank you to Mo Rahimian and Inshufen. Remember, you can find us on Instagram and Telegram, as well as Facebook, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, and roqemedia.com, our website. I'm Jian Ghomeshi. Mizun Bashin.
در سختی این روزگار دل برکم آهی برار آن آه میرسد بالای ابر آن ابر میشود رنگ بهار همچون هوا در هر نفس این نیز بگذرد This too shall pass. سازشو بی ساز من دل برکم سازی بران آن ساز می چکد بر کوه و دشت آن دشت می زند زنگ زمان همچون هوا در هر نفس این نیز بگذرد This too shall pass. در سختی این روزگار دل برکم آهی برار آن آه میرسد بالای ابر آن ابر میشود رنگ بهار همچون هوا در هر نفس این نیز بگذرد